So you want to play Wingrave and you're not sure where to put your affinity points or your ability points, and you just want to do a lot of damage and not take a lot of damage. Well, this is going to be the guide for you guys. So this guide is going to revolve around Wingrave using a two-handed weapon. It's going to revolve around a lot of damage, a lot of break damage, and crowd control potential, as well as having him be pretty sustainable and not have to use a lot of potions. You're also going to benefit a lot from this build if you're playing with like one other person or even two other people, because you're going to be buffing the damage of everybody around you at the same time as you're buffing your damage. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to jump down and look at the passives on Wingrave, and then we'll explain the affinity points and go from there. Now, the first thing we need to cover is Healing Pulse. Melee finishers heal Wingrave and one nearby ally. That's going to be very important when we get into it, because that is going to affect a lot of your affinity decisions you make with Wingrave, because it's going to buff you and somebody else. So anything that says when Healing Pulse something, it's going to affect you and usually another player. So keep that in mind with that, guys. Then we have the Art of War. When you use one of your weapon abilities, which is Q on the mouse and keyboard, and I don't know what it is on PlayStation. Somebody will probably let you guys know in the comment section down below if you guys don't already know that. But when you use that, it is going to inspire Wingrave and nearby allies, giving them 10% per pip that you spend on your weapon power, stacking up to 30%. This is going to increase your weapon power by 30% every time you use a 3-point weapon power. And that's also going to affect your nearby allies, so keep that in mind. That is a very big thing to keep in mind. You want to be activating your weapon power as much as possible to keep that bonus up as much as possible. Another thing you might not know about War Masters is they have 20 extra stamina, which means they can roll more than other heroes or other Wayfinders. So the affinity perks we're going to be going for are going to be Instinct. This is going to make your Healing Pulse heal for 20% more. I'm going to recommend you guys get the 5 points in Instinct right away to get this. It's a little bit extra healing. If you're a lower level Wingrave, this is going to help with sustainability of you and your team while you're leveling up. Then we have Discipline. Healing Pulse is going to restore 10% of your guard break meter. This is somewhat useful. We're mostly taking Discipline because of the stats on it, not because of the abilities on it. And then Focus, the one we're taking to 15. Healing Pulse reduces the incoming damage of the recipient by 10% for 8 seconds. So this is why you're going to want to try to finish those combos. Not only is it healing, but it's reducing the incoming damage of you and one other party member by 10%, which is a pretty big chunk of damage to be reducing, to be honest. And then the 15 point is Healing Pulse increases the weapon power of the recipient by 5% for 8 seconds. So after you build up your weapon ability meter, you're going to be able to use your weapon skill to give you 30%, and every time you finish a combo with your weapon, you're going to be getting 5%. Now, these are all affecting you and another party member, and the weapon ability one is actually going to be affecting everybody. So as far as priorities go, we want to get those 5 points into Instinct pretty much right away for sustainability. If you don't have those and you're already 30, don't worry about that. That's not really an important thing. This is only going to give you weapon power and crit power. Discipline, the one we're using for the stat dump, that's giving us weapon power and break power. That's why we're taking this one to 9. If you don't think you want that extra healing from Instinct, I would put this one all the way to 14, because it's going to give you more of the 2 stats we're prioritizing the most, which is weapon power and break power. The crit rating is not going to be bad, but we shouldn't have too much crit power in this build when we're done anyways. That being said, having extra crit rating is not going to hurt. And then Focus, we're taking this one to 15 because of the bonus. This is not giving us stats we want, but it is giving us stats that will be beneficial, because Healing Pulse is going to be based off of the maximum health of the character. This is going to be very beneficial to have extra health for sustainability purposes, and the ability power is going to increase the healing of stuff like Righteous Strikes and other stuff in your kit. So the stats aren't going to waste, but we're mostly taking this for the passive bonuses or the active bonuses from when we use Healing Pulse. Now for the weapon, this is going to be a controversial one, but we're going to be taking the Typhoon. The Typhoon is going to give us weapon power, it's going to give us break power and ability power. It is going to give us a lot of weapon power. It's even giving us crit power and crit rating and max health. This is pretty much the best itemized weapon for Wingrave. Alternatively, you can see Titan's Bane as another option. This is giving you weapon power, but it's not giving you break power. It's giving you ability power, Crit rating and crit power were pretty much evenly distributed, but this is also giving you physical and magical defense, which are pretty much wasted stats right now. So all in all, Typhoon is going to give you more of the stats we are looking for and more potential to break the enemies, which broken enemies are going to be better for your defense than the extra physical and magical defense on Titan's Bane. Now, Titan's Bane is a great weapon, and I highly recommend it for other characters, but as far as it goes for Wingrave, I think you are going to get a lot more bang for your buck out of Typhoon than you are going to be out of Titan's Bane. Plus, if you're newer to the game, it is a lot easier to acquire Typhoon than it is to acquire Titan's Bane. So if you want to do two-handed Wingrave, grab that Typhoon and profit. It is still the weapon I use at 30 with this character. All right, let's talk about abilities and ability point upgrades. Now, the first thing we're going to be doing is focusing on getting 5 points into Radiant Pulse. This is going to allow you and allies standing behind your Radiant Pulse to get healed. This is on a very short cooldown, so you can keep this thing up all the time, topping you and your allies off. I even use this between pulls to try to mitigate the amount of potions that I'm using during runs. And this will just help keep everybody kind of topped off, mostly help keep you topped off for the next pull, which I find this to be very beneficial, even if it is not a lot of healing because we don't have a lot of ability power. The amount of healing received overall is pretty beneficial, so I like to put the 3 points into this one. Now, we're not putting any points into Righteous Strikes because I don't feel like any of them are all that beneficial. The only thing I think would be really beneficial here is the 3 point, and we do not want to dedicate 3 points to this ability for that little bit of resilience recovery. Now, after you get your 3 points into Radiant Pulse, we're going to be wanting to get 3 points into Judgment. So all 3 of the abilities on Judgment are going to be really good. That's why we're going to try to get Judgment to 3 as quickly as possible after we get Pulse to 3. Hitting an enemy that's judged is going to deal additional break damage. You're going to get more health back from when you hit enemies that are judged, and you are reducing the weapon and ability power of judged enemies by 10%. All in all 3 of these abilities are going to benefit you a lot during a run, as long as you're using Judgment often. Now, keep in mind, Judged is also going to make the enemy focus on you, so don't use it if your health is too low. I would use this to help top off your allies rather than help top off you, because the additional incoming damage is probably going to outweigh the amount of health you get back from attacking a judged enemy, but this is really useful on bosses or other heavy-hitting monsters. And then our last point is going to go into Divine Aegis. This is just going to extend the duration of Aegis, giving you more time to get allies up, recover, etc. And then let's talk about Shatter. This is the ability we're getting from Typhoon. You perform an overhead slam with your axe, and it does a good chunk of damage, but it also sunders the enemy, causing them to take 10% more damage for each level of momentum consumed. So that's going to be up to 30% increased damage that they take. If we look at Art of War, we also are increasing our weapon power and ability power by 10% for each stack of momentum consumed when we use a weapon power. So you're causing the enemy to take an additional 30% damage, and you're increasing your damage stats by 30% for you and your allies when you use your weapon power. So the whole idea behind this build is going to be build up your momentum and activate your weapon power as often as possible to keep the damage both of you and your allies much, much higher. All right, let's talk about those Executioner Masteries now. If you want more sustainability, the Stalwart Momentum is a pretty good option. At level 3, it's basically going to reduce incoming damage by up to 15%, so 5% per momentum used. That's not too bad, but also when you fill up your momentum gauge, it's going to apply a shield for 10% of your maximum health to you and nearby allies, and the shield can only be applied every 15 seconds. Now, this is not a bad option, but we do not want to be sitting on all that momentum. So all in all, I do not think this is probably the best way to go. I do use it sometimes when I want more sustainability, but that's only going to help me when I'm building up the gauge, not when I'm dumping the gauge to get the extra damage in. That being said, though, every 15 seconds when you fill your meter back up, you're going to be giving that shield to you and all your allies, so there is some benefit there. Now, if you're doing content with enemies more over your level and you need that extra break damage to keep them staggered, this is the default for me for the most part. I only use Stalwart Momentum when I'm doing content where the enemies aren't hitting as hard or I can break them quicker and I just want to mitigate more damage. This is what I use when I'm doing content that's at or above my level. your heavy attacks deal an additional 40% break damage. Now with this build, I primarily focus on doing the heavy attacks. Not only is the heavy attack combo relatively short, so you're getting more healing pulses out there buffing you and your allies, but also it does extra break damage, and then with this, you're doing an additional 40% more break damage, keeping the crowd control going pretty strong. When you've got your stats prioritized properly with this build, 1 or 2 shots will break most enemies. If you want to speed up your runs, you can run double greed and do a Midas run with this build because of the amount of break damage you have and the fact that enemies that have Midas usually have a reduced health pool. Breaking them really quickly and then probably 1 or 2 tapping them after that works out really nice to speed run through content. So I definitely recommend trying a Midas run when you have this build all put together. Now, the one we are not going to be using at all is Inertia. This is going to make it so your momentum no longer decays while moving. That shouldn't be a problem. I honestly think that Inertia could probably use a rework to be something more beneficial. It's just not a compelling ability. I think the only character I would consider taking this on would probably be Senja, just because she basically has 2 separate momentum bars to contend with. Okay, let's talk about those stat priorities. When you get to 30, your stat priorities are going to be equal weapon power and equal break power. You're going to want to try to keep those relatively the same. You could go a little higher on weapon power, but we're talking about like 10k weapon power, 8k break power would be pretty much ideal. But you're going to be wanting to target probably when you're starting to gear this character up, going for about 7k weapon power, 7k break power, 6k weapon power, 6k break power. Anywhere you can pick up some max health, I would pick it up because you're going to benefit from that because of healing pulse. Some of the echoes we're going to be trying to get are going to be bloodletter echoes, give you a lot of weapon power and some break power. For balance echoes, Reaver Warbear is going to be really good. It gives you a lot of break power and some health. And the Wind Howler Echo is going to give you break power and some physical defense. Both of these work out pretty good in balance slots, so you don't really need to not match balance. And then our gap filling Echo is going to be the Ickerling Echo. This gives you a pretty good chunk of weapon power. I would put these in rush spots, defense spots, and cross slots if you don't have a good cross Echo yet. One of the cross Echoes that I would recommend picking up, it's pretty easy to get, would be the Third Keeper Echo. Good break power, some physical defense, so could be better. And I know there are better cross echoes out there. This is just the best one I have at the moment. Now, for the stats you're going to be looking for on your accessories, you're going to be looking for stuff with break power or stuff with weapon power. Shard of Affinity Core is a easy to get accessory that's going to give you break power. The Turtle Sword Spike Bracer, also good break power, and Bone Doll is a pretty easy to farm weapon power one. You can also use Bottle of Shadows for a weapon power one. And I would say that you're probably better off going with 2 break power, 1 weapon power, or 3 break power accessories if you can get them. As far as the slots go on the accessories, you're going to be wanting to try to find 1 attack, 1 balance across the board. If you get 2 attack, though, don't throw it away because you might get a double balance like I have here. So I'm trying to get a Turtle Sword double attack right now to kind of balance this out so that I've got 3 balance, 3 attack. But anything you can find, be it dual attack, dual balance, or attack and balance is going to be kind of what you're looking for. Ideally, you're going to need to change those slots up depending on the echoes you have to try to balance the attack power and weapon power. Like I said, our goal is to get around 7,000 to 8,000 break power and then put everything else beyond that into weapon power. So you're going to be swapping accessories around at level 30. You're going to be trying to balance out which slots you need for the echoes you need to kind of balance your stats out in that regard. If you guys have any questions about the build, let me know in the comment section down below. I hope to see more Wingraves out there with a Typhoon. I think that weapon is definitely underrated. Having leveled this character primarily with Titan's Bane and then switching to Typhoon about halfway through, playing both the weapons at 30, I definitely think Typhoon is not getting the love it deserves. Not only does the weapon have 2 attack cells in it, but it just has way better stats for a break weapon power build, which I think is kind of the best way to go right now with Wingrave. If you guys would like to see the build live in action, I will be streaming on the weekends, and for a little while I'm going to be streaming on the weeknights as well over on Twitch. There is a link in the video description down below. If you guys want to support the channel, that is a good way to do it. Hopefully we will be having some more build guides and some more Wayfinder content coming to the channel. Kind of waiting for the update that's coming in another week or two here to kind of get some new content in the game and do some more guides on that. But we should be having some more build guides coming out soon for characters like Silo and Kairos, now that Kairos has had his bug fixed and can no longer really run effectively the one-shot build. But until next time, guys, happy hunting.